Shabbat Shalom. As we know, we celebrate a mixture of holidays this weekend, and I'm not talking about the Michigan-Ohio State game, though as the good book says, good Shabbos and go blue. And we're very busy, we Jews. We're very, very busy people, so we don't have time to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and a happy Chanukah. So as you know, what do you call it when on those rare occasions we have a weekend in which Thanksgiving and Chanukah mix? You call it Thanksgiving-ka. Thanksgiving-ka. And what is the proper greeting on Thanksgiving-ka? Gobble tov. So we wish a gobble tov to each and every one of you. We have a mixture of these different things. And I think especially for us American Jews, we have a mixture as it comes to the celebration of Chanukah, which, as you well know, begins tomorrow night. We mix together two very different stories. The two very different stories of the origin of Chanukah. And so I think in our heads as Americans, sometimes we get confused and we imagine, Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, maybe Rodney Dangerfield, Adam Sandler, Ben Stiller, Sarah Silverman, Amy Schumer, all going up against the Greek army. And we try to figure out how that works, right? But we know there are two very different stories of Chanukah. There's, of course, the story we read in the books of the Maccabees, the apocryphal books, those books written near the biblical times but just after. And in the book of Maccabees, it tells us about a military victory. The small group of Maccabees, of these freedom fighters, these soldiers, who cast off the yoke of Greek control of the land of Israel, who sought to fight against the assimilationists and the Hellenizers, and who restored practice to the Beit HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple. And of course, they weren't able to celebrate Sukkot in its right time, that 8-day holiday of Sukkot, 7 days of Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret. So what did they do the moment they could rededicate the Holy Temple on the 25th of Kislev? They celebrated an 8-day holiday, and they called it Chanukah, in honor of the rededication of the Holy Temple. That celebration of God's role in their military victory, of God's part in them being able to cast off the mighty Greeks in order to take back control of the land of Israel. That is one story of Chanukah. The other story of Chanukah, with which we are just as familiar and perhaps even more familiar, comes out of the Babylonian Talmud. And of course, it talks about during these days how just a little jug of oil, enough oil for only one day, was found. And Nes Gadol Haya Sham, a great miracle happened there. And so that one jug of oil lasted for only 8 days. And enough time to make new oil. And thus we have the 8-day holiday of Chanukah. Right? We're familiar with these stories. And so even we celebrate with the military victory, we celebrate the incredible heroes that were the Maccabees. These people who stood up against their oppressors. Mighty soldiers. Kind of like the IDF today, standing up against Iran and against all who threaten them. With the Babylonian Talmud story, the Talmudic story of Chanukah, we celebrate a different kind of hero. And really, I think with the story of Chanukah found in the Talmud, the hero is our ancestors living in the diaspora, who for centuries upon centuries, in the face of great anti-Semitism, powerful and terrible hatred against the Jewish people, they fulfilled the mitzvah of lighting lights in public, of lighting flames where everybody could see. Think of how heroic it was for these people living in the midst of great darkness, of oppression and murder and persecution against the Jewish people, who still found the koyach, the strength, to pursue Nisa, to publicize the miracle that was Chanukah, by lighting their Chanukiah where everybody could see it. That's heroism. And we are in many ways here in Detroit, Michigan, now in the diaspora, we're inheritors of that legacy. The people, the heroes, strong enough to assimilate enough into their non-Jewish culture in order to advocate on behalf of the Jewish people, to serve as ambassadors for the Jewish people to the non-Jewish world. But not assimilate so much so that we could still fulfill the mitzvot of Judaism, that we could still celebrate our Jewishness. So what then here in the 21st century in Detroit, Michigan, could Chanukah possibly mean to us? Yes, we have to support the soldiers who defend the Jewish people in the land of Israel against her enemies, just like the Maccabees did thousands of years ago. Yes, we have to light our Chanukah and publicize the miracle of Judaism in this world in which we find ourselves, in which, yes, there is growing anti-Semitism, but thank God, it's not anything like our ancestors knew for thousands of years. I think there's one more thing this Shabbat immediately before Chanukah that we should begin to think about, and that is the root of the two stories. That which connects the military story of Chanukah with the religious story of Chanukah. And what is the one thread that connects these two otherwise very disparate experiences of the Jewish people? That one thread is faith. Because our ancestors, the Maccabees, celebrated God's role in leading them to their victory. Because each and every time our ancestors lit the Chanukah in the midst of the darkness that was their lives, they gave thanks to God for the miracles of life and of Judaism. And if anything here in our world, what is most lacking? It's faith. It's faith. I like to say it's the F word I use most often. Faith. We are in a time with the diminishment of religion. And so what do we see corresponding to the diminishment of religion? We see the collapse of the family. Ari spoke about it beautifully just a few minutes ago, how important family is to humanity. With the collapse of faith, the collapse of religion, what else do we see? We see arrogance. We see suffering. We see this lack of humility that is affecting us in so many different ways. We are lacking in faith. And so in this moment of great joy, in this moment of celebration, as we welcome a new child into the covenant, as we celebrate another young man becoming an adult member of the Jewish community, perhaps we can also take it upon ourselves as we prepare to begin Chanukah tomorrow night, that as we light the Chanukah and we say, thank you, God, for the blessings in our life, thank you, God, for the miracles you performed for our ancestors, we could work a little harder to affirm our own faith and even talk about the faith and the meaning of that faith with our friends and our family, with our children and our grandchildren. That we today can be like the Maccabees, soldiers in protection of not just Jews, but of Judaism. So that we can be like the Shtadlanim who for centuries went out into the non-Jewish community to support Jews and do what we can to strengthen the Jewish people in the midst of our non-Jewish world. But also so that we can be like the Shamus that goes out and lights the candle of faith in a world so desperately in need of faith and religion. This Shabbat immediately before Chanukah, let us be the light that lights other lights. And in so doing, may God bless each and every one of us with the peace, the joy, the family, the love that is Chanukah. Shabbat Shalom.